Verse 3, chapter 18, Jesus says, in red, truly I say to you, like this is like legit talk right here. Not every single time does Jesus say, truly I say to you. When he does, listen, you need to know this. Jesus is already a truth sayer, but on top of what he's saying, which is truth, and then he says, this is really true, you probably just need to perk the ears up and to open up the heart and say, what is it that you're saying? Here's what he says, truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like a child, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Can you read that with me? Come on, everybody. Truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like a child, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Usually my messages come out of a place of abundance, comes out of a place of like just knowing that God's been hanging out with me in this particular subject matter. But today, this week and next week, I'm going to be talking about this idea that this message comes out of a place of more of absence than it does abundance. It comes in just an awareness of my need rather than something I feel like I'm grabbing a hold of. So this is more like times of confession that I'm going to bring to you like this week and next week, and hope that we can come together and walk this path out so that we can start to pray this thing in and just practice it together. Because I haven't figured it out. I'm not there on all of the subjects, but on this one, I really see my deficit and I really see my need. And that's why God's been stirring this up in me. And I want to share it with you so that we can come together as a family and say, how can we do this together? And so I titled the message in a way that is a directive and it's also a prayer. So if you're taking notes, I want you to write this thing down because we're going to be hanging out with this week and next week on the title. It's See the Wonder and Stay Curious. Come on, see the wonder and stay curious. I want you to look to your neighbor, turn to him right now, and tell him the title of my message, See the Wonder and Stay Curious. See the wonder and stay curious. I don't know what it's been, but I feel like a little bit of unveiling has been happening that God's been showing me. You've lost it here. You don't have it. There's a lack. And it's almost like an erosion where you don't really recognize some of the things that are missing in your life until you come face to face with where they've been. You know what I mean? And so it's like a marriage maybe. And you think in a honeymoon, when you first get married, your marriage is great and it'll never be like them over there. And then all of a sudden you get to the point where you look at each other and you realize, man, how did we get to this point? Come on, you ever been there? You don't have to raise your hand. I just want to know that you're there. And so when we walk through this, right, sometimes there's subjects that God brings up in our life that He just wants to recognize, hey, how are we doing in this area? And I believe the wonder of God is supposed to captivate our soul, and we're supposed to be stirred up in curiosity every single day. Just like Matthew 18 says, like a child. Just like a child. And I recognize one of the moments that I really just kind of felt like, gosh, this is where one of the areas that I've been missing is brings me back to the very first time that I actually showed up to North Carolina. The first day I arrived to SOP, Whispering Pines Airport, holler back, you know what I'm talking about? And I drove in on Morganton, and I went past Turnberry Woods towards CCNC, and I saw the most amazing thing ever. This boy from Kansas, who had only seen Christmas trees get about like this big and that wide, drove down Morganton, and there was a wall on this side and a wall on this side of pine trees that went from the ground seemingly all the way to the sky, and I was absolutely amazed. Come on, have you ever done this? No, because you lived here for too long. Right? Because that's what happens. When you see the pine trees, you're like, I don't like pine trees. You know, they get sap on my car. They throw pine cones at me. And let alone all the pine straw that comes down and clogs up my gutter. I don't like pine trees. Come on, anybody with me? Like where have I gotten to the point where now I don't like them? And at one time, 13 years ago, I did the math. I have traveled this Morganton Road, same place, every single day. We moved houses once, and I've had a change in job once. Those are big changes, but every single change has allowed me to make the same commute. almost as if God's saying, don't forget, when you first saw this, you were in awe. And so now, every single day, I drive by there, and sometimes I don't even see it. Sometimes I drive past and I said, oh man, have you ever done that? Have you ever made a commute and be like, whew, what just happened? I don't remember the commute at all. My brain, come on, this is dangerous. My brain was elsewhere. And we're just not present. We're just not there. I have driven by the wonder of God every single day, and I just got to ask myself, and this is my prayer, God, let me see the wonder and stay curious about the things that you have shown me in the past so that I can still remain there today. Now let me go to Matthew 18. This is the key verse today. I want to do a little bit of teaching around Matthew 18 to talk about how we can see the wonder and stay curious and become childlike. Matthew 18 says, unless you turn and become like a child, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. I want you to highlight 3 words, 3 concepts here. If you're taking notes, I want you to write these 3 areas down. I need to teach on these for like just a few minutes, so just bear with me. Let me break these down and get all like nerdy and teaching professor-like on you just for a little bit so that we can build on these concepts. You good with that? Love me some feedback. I don't know. I usually don't ask rhetorical questions. Are you good with that? Yeah. All right. Augustine's in the house. Highlight these 3 ideas. Become, enter, and the kingdom of heaven. Let me just start with the very last one, the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is literally heaven. Jesus talks about heaven. It's the place where you will be one day when you put your faith in Jesus, and there is no more sorrow. There is no more sickness. There is no more pain. You get a new body. Come on, are you listening? You get to the place where you see the fullness of God. The kingdom of heaven is the reality of heaven. One day you will see what life is supposed to be like, and you will see him for who he is. That is how Jesus describes the kingdom of heaven. But then these 2 other words really just articulate this well. He says, enter, this word enter. Unless you become like a child, you can't enter. So enter, almost gives this word like, okay, first you're not in it, and then you pass a threshold, now you have entered. And he uses this word because there will be a day when you cross the threshold and your life will be behind you and you will go into the fullness of life. There is a day where you will pass from death, come on somebody, into life. There will be a day when you know heaven and you know God in part, and that you will one day, when you put your faith in Jesus, know him fully. Come on, anybody recognize the hope that brings you? There will be a day when you recognize what God is doing here in part, and you will enter into his fullness later so that you can experience the very presence of God. He says, I want you to enter. That's when you put your faith in Jesus and he open arms just welcomes you. But then there's this 3rd part that's the word become. Become. And this is a present word. This is a now word. So listen to what it says. I want you to become like a child right now. Why? So that you can see the reality of heaven right now. Listen to me. This is crucial. In part. You can see the reality of heaven right now in part by allowing your heart and your soul to become like a child, so that later you will enter the fullness of the kingdom fully after you die. So it's almost as if Jesus is saying, I want as much of heaven to you to be awakened to right now in part so that you can experience the fullness of heaven after you die. This is the process of becoming right now more humbled, to have a childlike faith. Come on, somebody. To trust like a child, to have faith like a child, to pray like a child, to have a mentality, maybe a myopic focus on like a child, to have the simplicity of heart and the purity of heart. Come on, somebody, like a child. Because isn't that what Jesus says in Matthew 5? The pure in heart will see God. He wants you to become like a child right now so you can see the wonders of God right now in this moment, so that you can experience the fullness of God's wonder when you enter into heaven. Stop the teaching portion. Did you capture it? You got it? So now moving on. I think it's always beneficial for us to look at some examples. So now we have, okay, get the concept. God, you want to awaken the wonder in me. You want to remain curious right now in part so I can see what you're doing so that I can enter into your fullness later on in the kingdom. That is what Jesus came to bring. And so how do I do that? And what examples can I actually look at? Well, one of the big glaring examples all throughout the entire Old Testament is this people group called the Israelites. You don't need to know much about them. Let me just tell you about them. It's a people group, a nation that God chose to be set free. They were under slavery. Does that sound familiar? You and I are under slavery. And then a people group that God says, I want to free you. Does that sound familiar? Because God wants to free you. Come on, somebody. And then so he used Moses to lead them out of slavery onto the promised land. Now, the Old Testament promised land is a figure of today how we are supposed to walk in the fullness of the Spirit. Come on, somebody. That's where he wants to bring you and I, the fullness of walking and being led by the Spirit. So then he moves them out of slavery through the wilderness, and he says, our goal and our place that we will get to one day is the promised land. 40 years goes by. 40 years. And I'm not going to bring you through all 40 years, but I just want to kind of highlight some of the things that God did during those 40 years. God says he actually allowed fire to lead the Israelites. Why fire through the desert? Why fire through the wilderness? Because in the desert, it gets cold at night, and you're going to need a fire that God provides every single time to camp out. Come on, somebody. And he says, during the day, I led them by a cloud. Why a cloud in the desert? Because it's hot, and you need some shade, and that it's just not familiar around in that area. Then later on, they said, hey, we're hungry. What did God do? He dropped manna, bread, literally from the sky. Can you imagine? You wake up in the morning, oh, sweet, man. Delivery. Like, you don't even need to leave your tent. This is great. You pick it up, you go back in, and you eat every single day. And then not only that, they say, hey, we're thirsty. So what did God do? He poured water from a rock. I know, I'm as amazed as you are. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was water from a rock. That is not normal. So why do I share all this? Because at some point in time, the Israelites saw the very hand of God, and they saw the wonder of God every single day. But you want to know what the Bible records as the Israelites' response to all of this through the wilderness? 2 words: grumbling and complaining. How do the Israelites see fire at night, clouds by day, manna coming in every day, quail coming in later for all you meat eaters, water coming out of the rock, and then all they do is respond in grumbling and complaining? I'll tell you why. It's because we do this today. The moment that we stop seeing the wonders of God all around us is the moment that we start to complain and criticize and judge. So look for the areas. Look for the areas that you're just frustrated with. Look for the areas that you quarrel. James says you fight and you quarrel because you have these desires that get stirred up inside of you, and they're just wrong. Maybe you just need to look up past the critique, past the criticism, past the grumbling. Look past it and just be amazed, because you were made to be in awe of God. You were made to have your soul and your heart be stirred so that you can see the very wonders of God. And here's the dangerous part. When you stop seeing the wonders of God, you begin to fabricate them on your own, and it's called entertainment. Let me say it again, which is maybe a little visual. When you stop seeing the wonders of God all around you, you start to fabricate them on your own. And then all of a sudden you grumble and complain about, this is too slow, I'm just not seeing what I want to see. And then you start trolling, criticizing. Come on, somebody. You don't like their photo because it's all political jargon. You don't know if you want to follow them anymore. Come on. You just need to put it down look past and be stirred by the wonders of God. And allow this thing to take its place in your back pocket or away from you so that your eyes can be opened again, past the grumbling and complaining. See, whenever we stop seeing the wonders of God, we fabricate it. We actually make things on our own, which are never good enough. They're just never good enough. This is exactly what the Israelites did. Moses leaves for like a couple days, a week, a month. Who cares? It's just short. You want to know what everybody does? Guys, got a great idea. Remember the manna? Yeah. Remember the fire at night, the cloud by day? Yeah, it was amazing. That was so good. Do you remember the water coming out of the rocks? Absolutely. God's wonders. I got a great idea. Yeah, absolutely. Why don't we make a cow made out of gold? Wow, yeah. That's a great idea. And everyone's like, I got some gold. Let me give it to you. So they get all their gold together and make a cow out of gold. And they say, this is awesome. Now, when we read that, we're thinking, that is, I'm in church. How can I say this? That's a bad idea. That's just, you're off. My cow is a little bit different. Come on, somebody. This is what my cow looks like. And I bet a lot of people are looking around with a crick in their neck, being like, yep, yeah. And people are looking at us thinking we've got everything figured out. People are looking at us and being like, you made a cow out of this. You made a God out of this. You're trying to get the wonders of God in here when it's all around here. That is see, we're in church. So that is a bad idea. That's a bad idea. Man, when did we lose the wonder of God? We need to stir it back up again and make this the title, be a directive and be our prayer. God, let me see the wonder and let me stay curious. Because when we start walking through some of this stuff, it's absolutely amazing what we can see. I mean, just look around. It says in Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God. Yeah, we agree. When we get to heaven, I'm sure we will just absolutely agree with the statement that there is so much glory in the heavens. But then after the comma, it says, the sky above you proclaims God's handiwork. Man, when was the last time you were awed about the handiwork in which is there like a painting every single day? It says the sunrise and the sunset never happens the same way twice. But when you and I look at a sunrise or a sunset, we're like, oh, I've seen that before. You haven't. Maybe we're missing the very wonders of God. I think sometimes maybe the best posture for us to actually see the handiwork of God is this right here. I had to, by default, get in this position not too long ago. I have 2 kids, that's why. They want to lay down in the grass. And all the while, my kids are laying, one on my left and one on my right. And we're looking at the clouds, this beautiful blue sky. You want to know what this guy is thinking about? I'm thinking, what are my neighbors going to say if they see me sitting in my yard? And then my kids are like, whoa, look at this cloud. That's amazing. They're making dragons out of this one, kangaroos and colors that I don't even see, and objects over here and scenes. And my son's like, hey, these are 2 big guys and bad guys. They're fighting together. And I'm like, I don't see that. And my wife's like, this is princesses over here. And I'm like, I don't see any princesses. All I see is like, a desk full of paperwork, which reminds me I got a lot of work to do. Come on, somebody, you with me? And all I am, I'm sitting in my yard thinking, I should probably mow my grass. And my kids, not in these words, but my kids are like, look at God's handiwork. Don't miss this. And my kids are like inviting me, hey, you should be more like me. You should not allow every single day to pass by without seeing the beauty and the wonder of God. It's all around us. Romans 1 says it's all around us, and it's always been around us. Romans chapter 1 says, for since the creation of the entire world, God's invisible attributes, like his nature and his quality and his characteristics. He says his power and his nature have clearly been what? Clearly been seen. They have clearly been seen by those who have eyes to see in all the things that God has made. We were on a walk, just our family, right out in front of our front house and down our street. And I came home one day, and my kids were full of energy, and my wife is currently pregnant right now, so she likes to get her miles in every single day. And so I just had this brilliant idea. Our kids are full of energy. I need to get some tension out. Really, I just needed to close my rings. You know, any Apple Watch wears, I just need to close my rings. I had a purpose and a mission to get out there. Let's close the rings. Let's be active, you know? And so we went out there, and we went on a walk. And I was like, all right, this is going to be great. We're going to do like 6 or 7 just times, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. Mission-focused dad, because that's what we do, right? We're parents. This is what we're doing. This is what we're not doing. Don't touch. Stay here. You know what I mean? Here's your guardrails. You have a 4 and a 7-year-old who sometimes, not every time, but sometimes I believe can see more of the wonders of God than their parents. So we weren't 2 minutes into our walk, and you want to know what happens? Emery jumps over to where the lawn of someone's yard stops, and there's a little strip of like dirt in between the road. And she gets down and she's like, oh man, look at this. So then Hudson's curiosity comes over. He's like, literally, I think this is what he said, I've never seen anything like it before, you know. And in my mind, I'm thinking, you're 4, so you haven't seen a whole lot, but I'm sure you've seen this before, whatever it is. And they're both on their knees, and I'm thinking, okay, we got to go. Come on, let's go. Let's get back on our walk. Oh, man, look at the circles in it. And I'm like, no, guys, come on, we're walking. I either have to hit pause on my exercise ring, come on, somebody, or we just need, you know, oh, man. And Mommy needs to walk. Mommy needs to walk, everybody. I'm trying to pull the compassion card. I'm like, what are you doing? And so here's my kids, and they're looking, and I'm thinking, okay, you know, I'm just going to break down. What do you guys see? Like, how much money is it for us to really stop? It wasn't money. It was a snail, like a snail in its shell, which to my son was like an anomaly. We've seen shells before, but there's a snail in the shell. And, you know, he looked at me like, I know, right? How are you not joining me? Why are you still standing? Why do you not take a picture of this? You know, like, and I almost felt like my kids are like, this is God's handiwork. Like, it's right here. And honestly, I don't know that I've ever looked in that little crevice of dirt before. I mean, it's just, I've looked at the road, watching out for cars, you know, like, is there any meteors coming? I'm a parent, like, trying to keep you guys safe. And then my kids are like, oh, God's hand and his fingerprint. Check it out, the wonders of God right here. And man, I missed it. I missed it. And then I share that story with a friend. And then he shares this. He said, well, maybe your kids were doing the same thing that Solomon was doing back in the day whenever he wrote Proverbs 6. Because Solomon, the great wise king, once wrote these 3 words down. Consider the ant. Wait. You're talking about the wisdom that comes from heaven, the one that directs our life, the one that builds us up to be more godly, the guardrails to don't do unrighteous things, to do righteous things. He gives the wisdom to a man like Solomon, and he pens 31 chapters of absolute brilliance. And then Solomon at some point in time had the revelation that my kids did. It wasn't a snail, it was an ant. And then he painted this picture. He goes, can you imagine like a king in all of his glory? I mean, just decked out in the dress and having servants like he did, having the livestock like he did, having the palace like he did. I mean, this dude was rich on top of rich. I mean, he didn't know what to do with all of his cash. And he had everything his eye could see. And here Solomon is imagining down, looking at the ant and just writing it. Consider the ant. That's good stuff. So I wonder, like, I'm thinking, do the servants and all of his workers look at Solomon and be like, this dude's crazy? Or are they like, there's Solomon, at it again, never allowing one opportunity to miss God's fingerprints all around him. I wonder what he's looking at. I wonder what he's writing about. Later on, you see in his journal, consider the ant. They don't have a leader, yet everybody comes together. They work so hard and so diligent. They knock up harvest, so they have plentiful in the famine. Consider the ant. Maybe this is the posture. Maybe laying on your back in the grass. Maybe pausing for snails is more the posture that we're supposed to take to give Psalm 46 new meaning. Be still and know and know and know that I am God. See, I think sometimes the pace of a child is a lot better pace than the pace of a busy, complicated, stressed adult sometimes. So that sometimes we just miss the very wonders of God. And it's probably where David said in Psalm 33, he says, let the whole world fear the Lord. Come on, somebody say this with me. And let everyone stand in awe of God. Let everyone stand in wonder. Let us see the wonder. Let us be in awe of what God's doing. I think the culmination of this message came whenever we were having dinner the other night. And our family was sitting around the dinner table, and I had had a pretty rough day, and I was a little bit quiet and very much to myself. And we were sitting down, and my kids were like just full of life, full of joy. Emery and Hudson were having a great time. They could have a great time doing anything. Isn't that the brilliance? They're like just free of the fear of man. Come on, that's just, when I think about childlikeness, I just think I want to be free of the fear of man and not think so much about what other people think and just do what I know I need to do. So we're at dinner, this is just at our house, and they're just having a great time, not disrespecting or anything and not being super loud, eating, but just having a good time. I mean, how do you have a good time eating vegetables? I don't know, but they did it. You know what I mean? Conquered. And so my wife says something to me that just kind of, resonated. She said, I bet you, she was talking about me, I bet you were a lot like Hudson whenever he was a kid. And you want to know my response? Again, I had a bad day. So I was like, nah, probably not. Probably wasn't like that. Mumbling, complaining, sound familiar? I just kind of dismissed it. And then my wife probed a little bit more because she knew what kind of day I had. She said, no, I think you were a lot like Hudson. Joyful, carefree, always just changed the atmosphere whenever you come in, just made it a lot more lighthearted. And then I just kind of sat back and I was looking at my son. And I just asked this question to myself. When did I lose that? Like, when did I become an adult and take responsibility and move away from the very things that God would stir my wonder, and I stopped being in awe? When was the moment that I walked by the snails and just didn't care anymore? What was the year marker that I drove to work and I stopped seeing the pine trees as wonderful creations declaring God's goodness? When did I stop laying down in the grass and looking at the handiwork of God? When did I miss God's creation that has clearly been seen since the beginning of everything, of his invisible attributes? I just wonder, when did I miss it? And so then I just asked Hudson, I said, hey buddy, can you do me a favor? Can you pray for me? Like, I looked at him and I just said, I want to be more like you. So I got out of my seat, I tucked myself under my son, I put his hand on my head, and I said, just pray for me. Whatever comes to mind, I want to be more like you. I want to be childlike, but yet I want to grow up to maturity. I want to see the wonder, and I don't want to miss the very things of God. I want to become like a child now so that I can see heaven in part, so that later I can experience heaven in its fullness. I want to trust like you, buddy. I want to pray like you. I want to think more like you.